Hey friends, welcome back for another rousing conversation with my friends Rory and Dave Kranzler from Investment Research Dynamics. Dave, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me on again. I love talking with you guys.
Hey, love having you back. And Rory, welcome back as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, we have a lot to talk about today, but I definitely want to kick things off by talking about the possibility of infighting happening at the highest levels. I found it very interesting that Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer at Facebook, her husband David Goldberg died last week, and it's being reported in the New York Times that Mr. Goldberg, 47, was on vacation with family and friends at a private beachfront villa near the Four Seasons Resort in Punta Mita, a large development. He left his room about 4 p.m. on Friday, collapsed while exercising, and died of head trauma and blood loss. And it's just a very fishy story. I want to play this clip from Kevin Blanch. Kevin Blanch, if you guys don't know, has a YouTube channel. It's Kevin Blanch on YouTube.
This is a major story, and I'm going to tie this all in, and this is, again, why you have to do the work. These are the ugliest human beings in history, inside and out. So she's the COO, not CFO, has been reported. She runs that entire show. She's the Facebook NSA queen. She is the face of NSA. You want to hate NSA? There she is, right there. That's who runs NSA. So he is a fellow at Harvard at the exact same time as Barry Antoinette, Barack Obama, the biggest Uncle Tom, who betrayed the African-American community, who betrayed the whole world. Mark my words, this is going to be one major story. She is the queen of the NSA.
Now, I just wanted to play that clip for you guys because this was news to me, and Kevin Blanch's report alerted me to it. So much to talk about. Do either of you have any impressions or feelings to share about this sudden and inexplicable death of Dave Goldberg, the husband of Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook?
Sounds like another dead executive that they're just trying to weed out. So just like the nail gun suicide, and I'm going to throw myself off the 27th floor of X building, and just another one. That's the way I see it.
I guess my impression of this whole thing, notwithstanding whether or not you believe that companies like Google and Facebook are CIA/NSA fronts, I believe there's a strong element of truth to that, although I've always wanted to see stronger proof. I mean, this goes back to the days when it was said that AOL was basically founded and funded by the CIA. Now, I never saw direct evidence that that was true, but I never saw direct evidence refuting that. And sort of the same situation applies with Facebook and Google, although I can certainly see where Facebook and Google would prove to be infinitely invaluable as an information source for both the CIA or the NSA. But putting all that aside, the only thing that I can say about this that I can really grab onto is that the cause of his death is very suspicious. Now, this is from the New York Times report on it. Quote, Mr. Goldberg left his room around 4 p.m. on Friday, collapsed while exercising, and died of head trauma and blood loss, said the spokesman. His brother Robert Goldberg found him on the floor of a gym at around 7 p.m. with blood around him. The spokesman said it appeared he, quote, fell off the treadmill and cracked his head open. Now, I find it very hard to believe that that was the cause of death. I mean, I've seen some rough accidents in gymnasiums, but I've never seen anyone fall off a treadmill and crack their head hard enough to cause blood loss, let alone enough blood loss to cause death. Now, I run on a treadmill all the time, and a lot of times aggressively, like I crank up the speed and I crank up the incline on it. And unless he was on serious muscle relaxers or drunk, I find it hard to believe that that this accident could have happened the way we're being told it happened. Which then leads me to try and understand what the motive would be to have this guy whacked. And that's kind of what my thoughts are on this situation. It's definitely not what we're being told it is, but what is it and why?
Well, yeah, I completely agree. I run on a treadmill 3.5 miles, 5 days a week, and it's hard to imagine one falling off a treadmill in a way that would cause death. 47 is not a man of advanced age. Clearly, if he died of quote unquote head trauma, either it was a very horrific accident or it's very much the potential that he was taken out. I would hope that an investigation and an autopsy is done to determine and prove conclusively that falling off a treadmill can kill a person.
I would echo what you were saying, Sean, as far as an autopsy, but I guess my tinfoil hat is on pretty firmly because I would have a hard time believing anything that it said. So,
Yeah, they're not going to release a bona fide autopsy report. They may not even release an autopsy report because no one's probably going to ask for it. No one in the mainstream media is going to come out and say, hey, can we see the autopsy? So who's going to ask for it? I would like to know what the motive is here. I mean, I have to say that I do not believe the story they're telling us about the circumstances of his death. But I would like to know what the motive was. I mean, why do they want to whack this guy?
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree. I think maybe it's grasping at straws here because so many of us are looking for some sign that there is actual pushback to the Rockefeller-Rothschild Western banking cabal. You know, of course, I did that interview with James Corbett in which he quantifies in some very plausible ways in which the banking cabal is just as much rooted in China. China's a big part of rolling out their New World Order, that the collapse here is not going to break the back of the Western banking cabal. And that's pretty depressing news. Do you think Corbett's wrong on that, you guys?
I do not. I think he's absolutely spot on. I mean, otherwise, why would all of the Western entities, all the Western sovereign nations be joining the AIIB, and with the exception of the United States, which is kind of suspicious in itself, and why would they be allowed? Why is the CPM group or the gold exchange? Why are they setting up from out of Chicago? Why are they setting up in Shanghai? There's too many signs that say that the rat is changing locations.
I've always thought that high-level bankers don't have any allegiance to any one country. I think they nest wherever they're allowed to nest and suck as much wealth as they can from the population. And then when there's no more wealth to suck out, they move on to their next victim. So greed does not have allegiance. And at the end of the day, you know, international bankers are driven by greed and power. And so, yeah, I mean, I noticed, you know, quite some time ago that all of the too big to fail banks that are seated in this country right now have not relocated, but they've opened up offices all over Asia, including Hong Kong and Shanghai. And that told me that there's definitely going to be a shift going on. I mean, Jim Rogers, who's obviously he comes out and criticizes everyone, but he's still part of the inner club, and I know from a very credible source who asked me not to share the email with anyone that he shared with me. You know, Rogers loves being part of the club, but he was one of the first high-profile guys to move from New York to Singapore, and that kind of tells you all you need to know about where this whole thing is going. So, and I think you need to differentiate. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and a lot of my thinking on it has come from private conversations I've had with Paul Craig Roberts. I think there's two sources of power in this country. One is from the banking cabal, and the second one is from the military complex cabal. And I think those two are actually at odds. And I do think that the military conflict between ourselves and Russia and China, I think that's very real. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, in what you would probably term the neocons, I think those are the ones that are driving the hostilities, and I think that's where the danger is in the potential for a nuclear war.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that and as it relates to China, I hope that there will be an ultimate double cross of the Rothschild Rockefeller banking cabal and the ruling elites, to the degree that, the Chinese in the art of war, they're in a multi-century long chess game, just like the Rothschilds have been in a multi-long century chess game against humanity, essentially. It'd be my hope that the Chinese would double-cross them at some point, and that the powers that be, which Corbett describes as the New World Order, this is all part of their New World Order agenda, and they need the United States in this economy to collapse so they can usher in their New World Order, and China is a big part of that puzzle. I guess it's just my hope that China would ultimately double-cross them. And Rory, as you and I have talked about, the Opium Wars come to mind.
Right.
Hopefully China will remember what was done to them, and these oligarchs in China are just playing along in an art of war sort of fashion, and ultimately will double-cross the New World Order and the Illuminati powers.
Well, while you were talking, that's exactly what I was sitting here thinking is that it's really the only hope that we have, is that it is, in fact, a gigantic chess move on the Chinese part, and when the time is right, they're going to unleash the payback from the Opium Wars, because that was devastating to that nation. Not only to their economy, but to their people. I mean, my God, it was just horrific. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the history of what was done to these people, I mean, it's just incredible. And that's really, I pray that's what's happening. I really do, because these people are evil, they are sinister, and they need to be rooted out of our world. And we've discussed before, Putin's role as well. I mean, and Dave, you think that he's not playing along, and I hope that I think that may be part of it as well. I mean, there's some really big chess players out there right now, and there's some big moves that are happening that are just, oh man, it makes my head spin to think about it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's as simple as kind of, well, the oligarchs and Western influence elitists are all in bed with the United States elitists and the European elitists. I do think it's multifaceted. And Dr. Roberts has written articles where he references fifth column influences in Russia and China, and the fifth column influences would be the pro-Western factions in both those countries that are basically, a lot of it is been planted by the CIA over the years, but a lot of the guys that are the leaders of the people that you would identify as fifth column leaders are Western educated. But the Chinese Communist Party is not loaded with that. There's different factions within the party itself, and Putin is clearly not a fifth column influenced. He hates the United States. I mean, he was bred in the KGB. He saw what happened to Russia when it basically fell from its power roost. And guys like that, they want revenge. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, and again, it's not like this. I still don't think that this country is completely controlled by the bankers and the Rockefellers, et cetera. I think there's some other factions inside the government, like in the military complex and the intelligence complex, that have a different agenda. And I think a lot of these guys actually love this country. The bankers have no allegiance. They could give a crap either way. Yeah. So to me, and again, my whole thinking on this matter just kind of boils down to looking at history. And there's never been a time in history when the power mongers from multiple countries have been willing to share power. There's always been one guy who's risen to the top.
Yeah.
And I think that's just human nature. It's human nature to not want to share power. And I think, to me, that's where I'm rooting my hope that someone can rise up and overthrow all the evil that's taken over this country.
Yeah, I hope so. You say one guy rises to the top. Of course, I think of one family, the Rothschilds, and of course, they're partners in crime at this point, the Rockefellers. But I just want to say this as it relates to other powers also yielding control within the United States. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I posted it at SGT Report, and it kind of plays into what Catherine Austin Fitts has been talking about with the breakaway civilization and the secret space program and the slow burn. Here's the article. U.S. military goes to the stars. Americans stay grounded, I wrote. Secret Air Force spaceplane gets Darth Vader-style engine. Let me just read this to you guys. The Air Force's secret robot spaceplane is going to try out a new engine. The X-37B has so far spent a total of 1,367 days tooling around in Earth's orbit doing classified things. Well, now it's going to get Hall thrusters. Hall thrusters get their name from the Hall effect, where an electrical field is produced perpendicular to a magnetic field. Set up in an engine, this electric field accelerates ions from a noble gas like xenon, propelling it outwards fast enough that they can provide thrust for the vehicle. I read that to you guys because, of course, as you know, NASA's Space Shuttle for the People program has been dismantled and put in the closet. But the military continues to have all sorts of sexy new technologies that it gets to use for its benefit in missions that are classified, as the rest of us get stuck here ground-based and get to suffer the effects of geoengineering. I just find it fascinating that the military has Hall thrusters and we still have petrofuels to run our vehicles on. Any reaction to that story, guys?
That's all news to me. I'm not sure what a Hall thruster is or what it does. As far as, is this a different type of fuel?
No, it's a different type of propulsion system, and I think the takeaway from this article is twofold, one of which is to remind people that the Air Force has an X-37B, which has been tooling around in Earth orbit for the last 1,367 days with no need to refuel, and that in itself is exotic technology, and now it is being made public by Popular Science that they have this Hall thruster, which is clearly the next evolution in technology that they're at least willing to make public through a publication like Popular Science. It makes you wonder what they have that they're not telling us about.
Well, I think there's a reason why they let stuff like that leak out. Now, whatever the reason is, I don't know. But clearly, the only reason we have that information is because they let it leak out. But I would also suggest, and I think they're trying to showcase their technological superiority. I think Russia and China are probably on the same curve as the United States technologically. In other words, I don't think the U.S. is developing anything that Russia and or China don't have the equivalent of. Mm-hmm. And there's probably some areas I've read about where China is actually more advanced than the United States now.
Well, China does have some amazing technology, and it doesn't help that the Clintons were turning over all sorts of classified technology and giving all sorts of trade secrets to the Chinese. And, we know what Hillary was doing as it relates to uranium companies, and she's a traitor, and we could talk a little bit about that if you'd like. But I'd be remiss not to bring up silver and precious metals with you guys before I lose you, because I know, Dave, it warrants saying that you've predicted that for 2015, silver will be the best performing asset. Correct me if I'm wrong in that, but I think that's what you said. And it warrants mentioning because as we look at the Shemitah and the 7-year cycle and September 2015, which a lot of people are worried about, and the impending collapse and the economic decline of the United States, and the latest GDP report, which shows that the economy is in real trouble if they wouldn't continue to fudge the numbers. We're in a lot of trouble here, and precious metals are acting differently, silver specifically, lately. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I said in February, I put out a report that I said silver is going to be the best performing asset for 2015. And I reiterated it yesterday in a short podcast that Rory and I did for the Shadow of Truth. And I still believe that. Now, I compared silver to gold in the S&P. So silver was up through yesterday, up year to date 6%. The S&P was up a little over 2%, and gold was basically flat on the year. It was up a little bit. And it didn't occur to me until this morning. I probably need to see where oil was priced on December 31st. Oil's going through a very extreme short squeeze right now, and I think oil's going to head back down anyway. So I still think silver is going to be the best performing asset. I think that we're seeing a lot of indications that there's shortages of silver for delivery, and I think that silver is going to lead both the gold and silver, collectively the precious metals, into their next, I'd call it their second leg of this bull market. That'll take them up to levels that I think people wouldn't even believe is possible. And I think that's going to happen in conjunction with the dollar. I think the dollar is getting ready to go through a pretty shocking sell-off.
Rory, any comments?
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And one of the things that I was looking at this morning, it's more related to the economy, Sean, as far as what you were saying, the GDP falling off a cliff. There was an article that was released this morning, and I actually wrote about it. The global economy is coming to a halt. And coming out of China, what we find out is the container shipments, they've basically come to a halt. And if you combine that with the Baltic Dry Index, which has been bottom bouncing for, I don't know, close to a year now, we aren't going anywhere. So that, which ties into what Dave was saying as far as the S&P being only at 2%. That's completely manipulated. Silver and gold, as we know, or both of those markets are manipulated. If you're not holding silver and gold right now, then I really feel for you, because they are going to perform quite well. And the September timeline that you referenced, Sean, there's a lot of people that are looking at that. I mean, and I've been hearing that since October of last year, since October of 2014. That's something that we all need to be aware of. This end of second quarter, beginning of third quarter 2015, that things are going to look a lot different. Whether it's tied to the Shemitah or what it's tied to, I'm not sure. You know, if it's just the raw numbers. But I mean, we've got these real indications. You know, Michael Snyder writing about 6,000 retail stores that are going to be closing between now and the end of 2016.
Yep.
That's real.
Yep.
I mean, you know, so.
Especially in a service economy. I mean,
in a service economy.
What do we have left when all the retail closes? You know, what do we have left when all the restaurants close? I know they're busy, guys, on Friday night when you go out to your local P.F. Chang's. They're packed. I get it. But what do we have left when this service economy dies? I mean, it's Bill Gates who's saying his bet is on the Chinese yuan. And Kranzler, as you've been talking about, and others, the suspicion is that the SDR will soon contain the Chinese yuan. They're de-dollarizing the dollar, and they are shoring up global interest in the yuan, which is going to be revealed, I think, as being gold-backed at some point in the future. This is a changing paradigm. And I'll tell you what, the other thing I want to ask you guys about is inflation and hyperinflation. Dave, are you seeing any signs of hyperinflation? I'm going to just share a couple of anecdotal things. Our friend, the Wealth Watchman, talks about the worst asset class to own during the collapse, and he's talking about these homes now selling and these New York apartments selling for $100 million. In 2013, a Ferrari GTO sold for $52 million. We're seeing inflation, astronomical numbers being paid for things like cars and homes and apartments. But we're not seeing hyperinflation in the real economy, or are we?
I think it kind of depends on, you know, how you want to define hyperinflation.
Yeah, I do too.
Now, for sure, the majority of the money that was printed by the Fed is still inside the banking system. It's sitting in the excess reserve accounts of the too big to fail banks. In fact, about 2.6 trillion of the 3.6 trillion that the Fed printed is still sitting in the excess reserve account. So it's still inside the banking system, and it hasn't leaked out. It's, you know, it's sort of leaked out into the real economy, but no one in the real economy has benefited from it. And that's probably part of the reason why you're not seeing what you would think of as, oh, I sat down at a cafe this morning to have a cup of coffee, and by the time I ordered my second cup of coffee, the price had gone up 10%. That's what happened in Weimar, Germany. I think we're probably going to see that. But let's just look at gasoline. Gasoline is up almost 30% this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a definition of hyperinflation, in my opinion. The price of ground beef. I mean, every time I go to the grocery store all the time, and every time I go there to buy ground beef for tacos, the price is higher,
Mm-hmm.
and I end up getting lower quality ground beef because I don't want to spend more money for the ground Angus. And so I think it's kind of the boiled frog syndrome, where you're maybe not noticing it on a day-to-day basis, but if you want to measure the price of a real basket of goods from a year ago and measure it today, I think you're probably going to be quite shocked at how much higher prices are.
Can I ask you something? You mentioned that 3.2. What was that number sitting in the Fed's accounts? The 3 trillion.
Well, the Fed printed about 3.6 or 3.7 trillion. That was about the size of the QE. 2.6 trillion of it is sitting in the excess reserve accounts of the banks. That's just cash that banks are holding.
Got it. So you mentioned the 2.6 still sitting inside the banking system. Let me just ask you about this, though, because these numbers over time get very cloudy, even for those of us who follow it. Now, you guys know Bernie Sanders has thrown his hat into the ring and hopefully can give Hillary a run for her money. God knows we don't want her to be on the ticket for the presidential nomination. But the Fed audit back in 2011 revealed that the U.S. provided a whopping $16 trillion in secret loans to bail out American and foreign banks and businesses during the economic crisis. $16 trillion. How do we account for that money? How do we know if that's ever been paid back? I'm sure it hasn't. I mean, we talk about inflation and hyperinflation. We talk about balances that the banks are holding. Do we even really know what the number is? I mean, it's $16 trillion, according to the Fed audit.
Well, we'll never know. We'll never know what really is going on at the Fed, and that's why the Fed is fighting the move in Congress to audit the Fed. I mean, the Fed is spending millions on lobbying efforts to fight that. The Fed hired a woman named Linda Robinson as their chief lobbyist a couple years ago. You know who she is? She was the chief lobbyist for Enron.
Okay. Another criminal Ponzi scheme. Enron.
Ironically,
another criminal Ponzi scheme.
Enron is a microcosm of what the Fed is, because the Fed's probably the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Truth is stranger than fiction. We know about the bonds that were going to mature on September 12th, 2001. But on September 11th, 2001, the towers blew up, and the gold underneath the towers went missing. A lot of it. And those bonds got to be reset. Max Kaiser talks a lot about this, about what happened on 9/11 and about Cantor Fitzgerald and about the bonds and about a lot of mysterious things that were supposed to happen on the 12th didn't happen because of the 11th. And I just want people to realize that, as Chris Duane says, listen to all, follow none, but truth is stranger than fiction. That's why I wanted to open this thing up by talking about Sheryl Sandberg's husband, the chief operating officer of Facebook. Her husband, a billionaire in his own right, died mysteriously on a treadmill. These things don't happen if you look at insurance actuary tables. It's very highly unlikely that when I go to the club tonight to run my 3 miles that I'm going to fall off the treadmill and die. That's why we talk about these things, you guys, because somebody's got to do it. We know the Mockingbird mainstream media will never give you the full picture. They won't give you the full picture about the Texas attack and the FBI handled patsies, and the information coming from Rita Katz, the co-founder of the Search for International Terrorist Entities intelligence group site. She's providing information that the Mockingbird media is running with as far as this Texas attack goes. She was also the same person that was getting these secret bin Laden videos. She's very much on the side of more Middle Eastern war, more American young men going to die in these wars. And it's our job to combat the propaganda. Guys, maybe from now on we should call our little podcast from now on Truth is Stranger Than Fiction.
I'm for it.
All right. Well,
unfortunately, that's what it is.
Well, it is. And, and again, like I said in that, let me find it here.
Well, here's a little piece of reality from left field. You were talking about the, those $50 million cars a minute ago. Jeff Berwick over at Dollar Vigilante which we posted at SGT Report, the Keynesian central bank craziness causing insane asset bubbles in real estate. There's a picture of a $400 million apartment in Monaco. $400 million penthouse. Are you kidding me?
Insane.
Just to throw in my 2 cents here, I mean, notice that these people throwing big dollars around on marquee real estate, art, jewelry, and collectors' cars, they're not throwing their money into the stock market. They've been pulling their money out of the stock market. They're putting their money into hard assets that are, they know at some point in time that the assets might not be worth what they're paying for them, but there will be a bid for them.
Yeah.
I mean, I can guarantee you 200 years from now, if not 20 years from now, there's not going to be a bid for stocks in the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah. And there won't be much of a bid for a $10 bill in paper form either.
And there won't be much of a bid for these middle-class homes that idiots are paying $500,000 for.
Yeah. Well, I just want to leave folks with this. When you visit our sites, when you visit SGT Report, if you see something that you just innately disagree with before you've clicked play, you don't have to push play. Some of this material we post because we find it intellectually stimulating. We find that even the most fringe information coming from guys like Ben Fulford or pick your source can spark thought and can spark conversation. And sometimes, maybe it can lead us to kernels of truth that may have otherwise gone uncovered. Truth is stranger than fiction, and I think that these guys are scrambling on a daily basis to keep this Ponzi stitched together. As you guys know, we hit the debt limit, and the magic money just stopped being printed. They stopped reporting on it. We hit the debt limit, and now we get no more updates. Clearly, what's going on behind the scenes is very alarming, because the money is still being spent.
It's being borrowed from the federal pension funds and being spent, and the Social Security Trust, that's where they're getting it from. Jack Lew is writing IOUs in the form of special treasuries to these pools of money. So if you're a beneficiary of one of those trusts, good luck.
Yeah, and if you have money in the bank, good luck with that, because that's what's coming next.
Yeah.
They've been saying it for 2 years at least.
Yep. And now we see in Australia there's a move to ban cash. There's a move to take us into this cashless society.
Everywhere to ban cash. That's coming to this country too.
Yep, absolutely. And it was from the great work of Aaron Russo, his honesty, essentially, to share with the world what he knew from being friends with Nick Rockefeller, that this was all part of the plan. They were going to have an event in New York, and then troops were going to go into the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and they'd be searching in caves for this invisible enemy that they'd never find, and that totalitarianism and the police state would roll out at home, and ultimately they would move us into what they want, which is their vision for the New World Order and a cashless society here at home. We can see it all playing out, and it's playing out faster and faster on a daily basis, and that's why we have these conversations. That's why we document the collapse, and that's why it's a joy to have on Rory from the Daily Coin and SGT Report and our friend Dave Kranzler from Investment Research Dynamics. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sean. It was great to be here.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, guys. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We do appreciate your support at sgtreport.com and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. Have a great week.